Expand your vocabulary with our Core 2000 Words ebook. It's free and packed with essential expressions that you'll use on a daily basis. Start building your vocabulary today. Click the link in the description below to download your free Russian ebook before it's gone. Hi, welcome to Introduction to Russian. My name is Alicia, and I'm joined by...
Hi everyone, I'm Katya.
In this lesson, you'll learn the basics of Russian writing. Russian is written using letters from the Cyrillic script, one of the most widely used writing systems in the world.
The Russian alphabet consists of 33 letters. These are 10 vowels. Of these, 5 are hard vowels and 5 are soft vowels. There are 21 consonants and 2 special letters which aid in designating hardness and softness. These letters do not produce sounds on their own. They merely augment the sound of a preceding letter.
Like English, Russian has upper and lowercase letters. Most letters look identical to each other, and the only difference is their size.
You can learn about each individual letter and get some insights into each letter and how to properly write it in our Learn Russian Writing video series. In that series, Svetlana breaks the alphabet down in the easiest way for you to learn. We'll link to this series at the end of the video.
Russian is written from left to right, just like English. Also similar to English, Russian is written in cursive letters when handwritten. It's called rapid or running script in Russian because the links between cursive letters significantly increase the writing speed.
Unfortunately, this increase in speed and convenience often results in the omission of the stress marks on the letter yo. It's continuously being omitted in modern-day Russian, making it look like the letter ye instead. This is convenient for those who are fluent in Russian, because words can still be understood based on context, but this can be problematic for new learners of Russian.
Every sentence begins with a capital letter in Russian.
Сегодня хорошая погода.
Proper nouns also begin with a capital letter.
Lomonosov, Moskva, Dnestr.
Proper names are also capitalized, but only on the first letter.
Индийское море, Багамские острова.
If all words in a proper name are proper nouns themselves, then they'll all be capitalized.
Северная Америка.
Unlike English, the pronoun for you is capitalized in Russian. It's done so as a sign of respect.
Вы не подскажете?
The days of the week are not capitalized in Russian.
Среда.
Neither are months, nationalities, languages, nor the pronoun for I in Russian.
Август. Эстонец. Испанский язык. Я один.
Okay, let's wrap up this lesson by recapping what we've learned. In this lesson, you learned that Russian uses the Cyrillic alphabet, which consists of 33 letters. You learned that Russian has upper and lowercase letters, and that it's written from left to right. You also learned a few capitalization rules in this lesson. We've covered only a few basic things about Russian writing.
Remember, you can check out our Learn Russian Writing video series as well. In that course, Svetlana breaks down the Russian alphabet, teaching you insightful things about each letter and how to write it.
In the next lesson, you'll be entering Russian boot camp, where you'll learn useful beginner phrases to get you speaking Russian right away. See you in the next lesson. Bye!
Bye!
Здравствуйте, я Светлана. Welcome to RussianPod101.com's Alphabet Made Easy, the fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn the Russian Cyrillic alphabet, the alphabet. Over the next 20 lessons, you learn everything there is about the reading and writing of the Russian language. By the end, you'll be ready to dive into the world of Russian literature, make your way through Russian cities, and really accelerate your Russian study. Ready to start? Then let's go! The Russian alphabet contains 33 letters. Seeing them laid out like this might seem intimidating, but the trick is to take it step by step, character by character. Don't worry about how hard it looks now. Just stick with me, and in a few short lessons, you'll see how easy it actually is. I have some really good news for you. Russian is largely phonetic. This means words are actually pronounced exactly like they're written. Also, if you look at all the characters, you will notice that many are exactly the same as English letters. We'll use this similarity to English to tackle the Russian writing system. Let's separate the letters into 4 types. True friends. They look nice and they are nice. These are letters which look and sound just like English letters. False friends. They look nice, but don't be fooled. These look like English letters you're familiar with, but sound different. New friends. They might look scary, but you'll warm up to them easily. These are letters you haven't seen before, but they have familiar sounds. Strangers. These will be the tricky ones. They look different from anything you've seen before, and don't have similar sounds to English either. We'll start nice and easy with some true friends. So, let's begin. We'll start at the beginning. Ah. So what sound does this letter make? That's easy, because the name of the letter almost always describes the sound that the letter makes. So it's pronounced ah. That's why this is a true friend. It looks like an English A and it sounds like an English A. What you see here are the printed forms. This is what you'll see on signs, newspapers, and anywhere that the letters are printed mechanically. As you can see, both the versions of A look the same as A in English. Now it's time to take out your pencils. We are going to practice writing. Find some paper and follow along. Even though it is rare to see the printed version of Russian handwritten, you'll practice writing them so you can get used to the shapes. Okay, here we go. Here is the uppercase. And here's the lowercase. Nice. Time for the next letter? Not yet. You just saw the printed version of A. However, when writing by hand, Russians use cursive letters exclusively. This is the way Russians learn to write ever since elementary school. Even though you practice writing in the print style, it's very rare to see that in the real world. When you write Russian, it's going to be in the cursive style. The cursive uppercase A looks like this. While sometimes there is a big difference between the printed and cursive letters, R is pretty straightforward. It's one long stroke and then a short one in the middle. Now here's the lowercase handwritten A. This is very easy too. It's similar to the cursive A in English, and it's also very easy to connect to the next letter. Now it's your turn. Here's the uppercase. And the lowercase. That's it for A. Let's keep moving. The second letter we'll learn is another true friend, K. That means it's just like the English K. It always makes the K sound. In the printed forms, the only difference between upper and lowercase is the size. It's writing time. First the printed versions. Here's the uppercase. And the lowercase. As for the handwritten version, the uppercase is quite similar to the printed letter, but different from the English cursive style. The lowercase is identical except for the size. Now let's write the cursive versions. Here's the uppercase. That means that we have to pick up our pen or pencil after writing the first stroke, and then connect K to the next letter with the second stroke. The lowercase version is the same. Great! You already learned 2 letters of the Russian alphabet. That means you're ready for your first Russian word. First, look at the printed version and try sounding it out. Did you read как? Well, you're right. This is how to write the word for how in Russian. Believe me, it's a lot better to learn new words in the original Russian, rather than relying on Roman letters. This will be the first of many new words for you. Now the fun part. We'll write it by hand. For words, I'll just do it in the cursive style. Congratulations! You just written your first Russian word. Now it's time for Svetlana's insights. Practice writing these letters and words until you don't even have to think about it. There is no better way to learn than to write the letters yourself. It's a good idea to keep a notebook with the new letters and words we learn in each lesson. Have you ever heard the Russian phrase «Кто там?» In the next Alphavit Made Easy lesson, you'll learn what it means and most of all, how to write it. See you there! Пока-пока! Здравствуйте! Я Svetlana. Welcome to RussianPod101.com's Alphavit Made Easy, the fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn the Russian Cyrillic alphabet, the alphavit. In the last lesson, we learned 2 letters, A and Ka. These letters are true friends, meaning that they look and sound like their English counterparts. In this lesson, we'll continue our study of the Russian alphabet by learning the 3 remaining true friends. Ready to go? Well then, let's get started. In this lesson, we'll learn these 3 letters. Because these are true friends, we know that they are going to look and sound like English letters. Our first true friend of the lesson is M. And yep, it makes an M sound. While some Russian letters do change their sound, M is always pronounced this way. Notice how the upper and lowercase printed versions are identical except for the size, unlike the English M. As we mentioned in the last lesson, you will see the print form on menus, packages, and maps, so you better learn to read them. Let's write them now. Remember, we are writing the printed forms just for practice. You won't see the printed forms written like this in Russian. Here's the uppercase. And the lowercase. Now that we've seen the printed forms of M, let's take a look at how to write it by hand. The cursive uppercase M looks like this. It's much sharper than the English cursive, but very easy to write. Lowercase m is exactly the same as uppercase, but just a little smaller. Also, when lowercase m comes after another letter, we add a small hook on the left. We'll cover it more when we practice writing some full words. Now we'll write them. Uppercase M is a single stroke, so you can connect easily to the next letter without lifting your pen or pencil. That's all there is to M. Let's move on. The second letter you learn in this lesson is another true friend, O. As you can guess, Russian O is the same as English O, and in printed form it's almost identical. It is usually pronounced as O. Sometimes it sounds like A. In later lessons, I'll tell you more about when and why the pronunciation changes. Here's how to write the printed versions. and the lowercase. It's cursive time. If you know how to write a cursive O in English, this shouldn't be a problem for you. O is a single stroke, so you can connect easily to the next letter without lifting your pen or pencil. As for the lowercase o, it's exactly the same but slightly smaller. Both the lower and uppercase versions connect to the next letter from the bottom. Now let's finish up this lesson with our very last true friend, O. Our final true friend is the letter T. The Russian T acts just like the T in English. In the printed version, both the upper and lowercase letters look like uppercase English T's, but with the different sizes. Here's how to write the printed versions. And the lowercase. As for the cursive versions, this one is a bit more difficult. The uppercase version looks like this. As you can see, it's not similar to the printed form or English cursive styles. If you thought uppercase was difficult, well, sorry, lowercase t is no easier. It looks a lot like a handwritten English M. If you get confused between the handwritten T and M in Russian, just remember that M is pointy and sharp, like mountains. Once you practice writing these a few times, they won't seem so difficult. T consists of 4 separate strokes, and you pick up your pen before writing the next letter. And the lowercase. Okay, well done! I think you're ready to learn some new words. Can you read it? It's pronounced tam. This is the word for there in Russian. Now let's practice writing it. We'll start with the T, move smoothly into the A, and then finish it off with that mountainous M. Remember how I said that M gets a little hook when it follows another letter? Well, here it is. Why do we have it? Many Russian cursive letters look similar, so we have to use a hook before M to show that we are writing a new letter. Getting tired yet? I think you can handle another new word. Can you read it? It's pronounced kto. You just learned the word for who in Russian. Time to write it. Let's start out with a ka, transition to a nice rounded T, and finish it up with o. Let's take it one step further. We are going to combine the last 2 words and write a very useful phrase, kto tam. It means who's there? You can use it when somebody knocks on your door. Start with kto, except with a capital K this time. Now follow it up with tam. Don't forget the hook. And of course we'll end the question with a question mark. It's done. Now it's time for Svetlana's insights. Be sure to add kto and tam to your notebook. We'll add new words in every lesson, and by the end of the series you will have a very useful collection of words that you wrote yourself. Well, we met the last of our true friends today. And that means we'll be entering some slightly more sinister waters in the next lesson. But it also means you will be able to expand your vocabulary with more words, including the Russian word for no. We'll learn that and much more in the next lesson of RussianPod101.com's Alphavit Made Easy. Пока-пока! Здравствуйте! Я Светлана. Welcome to RussianPod101.com's Alphavit Made Easy, the fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn the Russian Cyrillic alphabet, the alphabet. In the first two lessons, we covered the true friends in the Russian alphabet. Now we are going to take a look at some slightly more difficult Russian letters, the false friends. While true friends look and sound like their English counterparts, false friends look like English letters but sound completely different. Ready to go? Let's get started. In this lesson, we'll learn how to read and write two false friends in both printed and cursive forms. Our first letter is Y. You really want this letter to make an E sound, don't you? Even the upper and lower cases are the same as the English. This letter, however, sounds like Y and sometimes E. In later lessons, we'll tell you more about when and why the pronunciation changes. While Y is a false friend, at least it's not trying to deceive you too much. Here's the uppercase. And the lowercase. Now let's take a look at how to write it in cursive. The cursive version of uppercase Y looks like this. It's nearly identical to the English cursive and easy to write. Y is a single stroke, so you can continue with the next letter after the uppercase without lifting your pen or pencil. Now let's take a look at the lowercase handwritten Y. Again, it's similar to the English cursive, but in Russian, their starting point isn't from the bottom. Now we'll write them. And the lowercase. For both the upper and lowercase versions, it's easy to connect to the next letter. The second false friend we'll learn in this lesson is N. As you can see, it looks exactly like an English H. But of course it doesn't sound like one. It's actually pronounced like the English N. You could always rotate the middle line in your head to make them into N's. Here's how to write the printed versions. And the lowercase. Now let's take a look at how to write N in cursive. The uppercase version looks like this. As you can see, the cursive version of N is very different from the printed version and is written in a single stroke that ends at the bottom rather than the top. As for the lowercase, it's a little bit different. Handwriting time. And the lowercase. That's all for new letters in this lesson. So let's practice writing these letters in some new words. First up is something you'll need to use every day, and probably already know. Try sounding it out. Did you guess нет? If so, great job! You may have already known this word before you watched this lesson, but I'll bet you haven't written it before, so let's do it now. Let's make this an exclamation. Нет. So we'll start with an uppercase N, followed by a lowercase Y and T. Then we'll polish it off with an exclamation point. Нет. Are you ready to stop? Нет? I knew it. We'll learn 2 more words that are very important and that you will hear all the time. Try reading them out loud. Did you say on? Great. What about она? Probably not, huh? Here you can hear how O can be pronounced as both O and A. Again, we'll talk later about why this happens. On is the male personal pronoun, the Russian equivalent of he, and она is the word for she. Pretty useful. Now let's try writing them. Let's start on with a nice O and transition smoothly into the N. Great! Now let's write она. Start with the O again, then make a beautiful N and finish it out with an A. Nice work! Now it's time for Svetlana's insights. You may notice that there are some pretty big differences between Russian and English cursive styles. Russian cursive is much more common and more complicated. But it's fun, and you'll really be able to impress your Russian friends with your beautiful penmanship. One structural difference between Russian and English cursive styles is their starting and ending points of letters. In English, letters usually start from the bottom of the writing line. But in Russian, all lowercase letters start slightly above the line. This gives the Russian script a much different look and is part of the reason that some letters have hooks. Well, that's all for this lesson. We'll continue next time with a few more false friends. We'll learn some very useful letters to write common words like "and" in Russian. We'll learn that and much more in the next Alphavit Made Easy lesson. Пока-пока! Здравствуйте! Я Светлана. Welcome to RussianPod101.com's Alphavit Made Easy, the fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn the Russian Cyrillic alphabet, the alphabet. In the previous lesson, we introduced our first group of false friends, Russian letters that look like letters of the English alphabet but have completely different sounds. The first false friends that we learned were ye and n. Do you remember how to write them? What about the true friends from the first 2 lessons? Make sure that you feel confident about the characters from past lessons before moving on. In this lesson, we'll continue by learning 2 more false friends. After that, we'll learn a few more words to add to your notebook. Ready? Let's go! Our first letter is V. It looks identical to the English uppercase B, right? But the Russian V, as you have probably guessed, does not sound like B at all. It sounds like the English V, but a little bit harder. Listen to the pronunciation carefully. V. This letter is almost always pronounced in this way, but it can sometimes sound like a F when it comes at the end of the word. Here's the uppercase. And the lowercase. The cursive uppercase V looks like this. It's nearly identical to the cursive B in English and should be easy to write. V is a single stroke, so you can easily connect it to the next letter after the uppercase without lifting your pen or pencil. Again, the lowercase v is similar to the English cursive, but the Russian V has a larger upper loop than the English B. Remember that in Russian, the starting point isn't from the bottom of the line. Now we'll write them. And the lowercase. The second letter we'll learn in this lesson is another you'll recognize by sight, R. As you can see, it looks exactly like the English P, except that it doesn't dip beneath the line as far as the lowercase p in English. This letter is difficult to pronounce for some native English speakers. It's like the Spanish R, but not quite as continuous. R. Here's how to write the printed versions. And the lowercase. Now let's take a look at how to write R in cursive. The uppercase version looks like this. As you can see, the cursive version of R is quite different than in English, and is written in 2 strokes. Please note that the lowercase r does not make a closed circle the same way as a lowercase cursive p in English. Handwriting time. And the lowercase. We'll continue learning more letters next time, but for now, let's practice using these letters in some new words. First up is a word that uses both of our new letters. Try reading it aloud. Did you say Venera? If you didn't, that's okay. Here we can see how ye can be pronounced as either e or ye. Venera is the Russian name for the planet Venus, and it's also a girl's name. Now try writing it. Let's start with an uppercase V. Venera. Great job! Now let's try writing a sentence. We'll combine a word from the previous lesson with a new word to make a sentence that hopefully you will never need to use. Try reading it. Hopefully you read on vor. This means he the thief in Russian. If someone snatches your purse or steals your wallet, you'll be glad you learned this sentence. Now let's try writing it by hand. Since it's a sentence, we'll start out with an uppercase O. On vor. Make sure that your connections are smooth and fluid. Now it's time for Svetlana's insights. Your handwriting is like a signature, and no two people's are the same. When you see actual Russian handwriting, you may notice that sometimes people write letters in different ways. You'll notice a lot of people don't connect letters properly to the next one. Other people mix print-style letters with cursive letters. However, if you learn cursive properly, you will certainly impress your Russian friends and be able to understand almost anyone's handwriting. Good luck! That's it for this lesson. Today you moved from writing single words into sentences. In the next Alphavit Made Easy lesson, we'll be back to meet the last of our false friends, and then it's on to uncharted territory. Пока-пока! Здравствуйте! Я Svetlana. Welcome to RussianPod101.com. Alphavit Made Easy. The fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn the Russian Cyrillic alphabet, the alphabet. In the previous lesson, we continued introducing some false friends. Russian letters that look like letters of the English alphabet but sound completely different. We've already learned several, but do you remember how to read and write them? Taking the time to review the lessons will be the key to learning how to write in Russian. In this lesson, we'll finish up with our false friends. Then we'll learn a few more words for you to add to your notebook. Ready to learn? Then let's go! Our first letter is S. It looks identical to the English upper and lowercase c, right? Of course, the Russian S does not sound like the English C, although I guess sometimes it does. I mean, the English C can sometimes make an S sound, so it's kind of like a mostly false friend, right? Here's the uppercase. And the lowercase. The cursive uppercase S looks like this. It's similar to the English cursive C, but thankfully it's a bit simpler than most Russian letters. Uppercase S is a single stroke which connects easily to the next letter without lifting your pen or pencil. As for the lowercase s, it's identical to the uppercase except for its size. Now we'll write them. And the lowercase. The second letter we'll learn in this lesson looks pretty familiar. U. As you can see, it looks similar to an English Y, with just small differences. Of course, it doesn't sound like Y at all, but at least it's easy to pronounce. U makes an U sound 100% of the time. Here's how to write the printed versions. And the lowercase. Now let's take a look at how to write U in cursive. The uppercase version looks like this. As you can see, the cursive version of U looks similar to the English Y. It's written in a single stroke and connects easily to the next letter. While the uppercase version does not dip below the line, the lowercase version does. Now it's time to write it. And the lowercase. Let's learn one more letter. The third letter we learn in this lesson should look pretty familiar too. Ha. As you can see, it looks identical to the English X, but of course it doesn't sound like X. Actually, this will be a new sound for most English speakers. Ha makes a harder H sound, H. Ha makes this sound 100% of the time. Here's how to write the printed versions. And the lowercase. As you can see, the cursive version of Ha is not at all similar to the cursive version of the English X. It's written in two strokes and connects easily to the next letter. Lowercase Ha looks exactly like the uppercase version, but just a little smaller. Let's write it. And the lowercase. And that's all! Wow! Great job today! We finally met the last of our false friends. We'll continue learning more letters in the next lesson. But for now, let's practice using these letters in some new words. First up is a word that uses two of our new letters. Try reading it aloud. It should be easy. It's pronounced сахар and means sugar. Russians love tea with sugar, so you'll see this word a lot. Now let's try writing it. We'll use lowercase letters. Сахар. Now let's try writing two sentences. As you know from a previous lesson, on means he. Turk means Turk, as in someone from Turkey. So the first sentence means he is Turkish. In the second sentence, we see есть, which is an important word meaning eats. And halva is a popular sweet in Russia, originally from the Middle East. In English, it's called halva. The second sentence means he is eating halva. Now let's try to write it. We'll start each sentence properly with an uppercase letter. Он турок. Он ест халву. Now it's time for Svetlana's insights. You probably realized this, but the order we're learning the alphabet is not actually the correct order. We're using this order because it's easier to learn. But just be aware that it's not the way Russian children learn it, or how a Russian would recite the alphabet. In the next Alphabet Made Easy lesson, we'll be introducing some interesting new letters that are going to be completely unfamiliar to you. Are you excited yet? Пока-пока! Здравствуйте! Я Светлана. Welcome to RussianPod101.com's Alphabet Made Easy, the fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn the Russian Cyrillic alphabet, the alphabet. In the last lesson, we met the last of our false friends, the Russian letters that look like letters of the English alphabet but sound different. I hope you remember how to read and write them all. If you've been practicing, I'm sure you're doing a great job. In this lesson, we'll learn a new category of Russian letters, new friends. New friends are letters that don't look like English letters but have sounds that can be found in English. That means that they should all be very easy to pronounce. Ready to learn? Then let's go! Our first new friend is B. This is the first truly new-looking letter for English speakers. Although it looks new, it should sound quite familiar. B is pronounced just like the English B. As you can see though, the upper and lower case look very different. Here's the uppercase. And the lowercase. The cursive uppercase B looks like this. It has two strokes and continues to the next letter after the lower stroke. The lowercase is quite different from the uppercase, and you have to lift your pen at the end. This makes lowercase b the only letter which does not connect smoothly to the following letter. Now we'll write them. And the lowercase. Let's move on to another new friend. The second letter in this lesson looks like a rotated uppercase L in English. G. While it may look strange, G has a pretty familiar sound. G functions in the same way as the English G, and almost always makes a hard G sound. Sometimes it can sound like V, but only in rare cases. Here's how to write the printed versions. And the lowercase. Now let's take a look at how to write G in cursive. The uppercase version looks like this. As you can see, the cursive version of G looks kind of like the uppercase T in English. It's written in two strokes and connects to the next letter by swinging back around. Now let's take a look at the lowercase cursive G. Lowercase G is a lot trickier because it looks nothing like the printed version. On its own, it's written like this, but when connected to the preceding letter, it looks a lot more natural. Handwriting time. And the lowercase. That's it for our new friends today. We'll continue learning more letters next lesson. But for now, let's practice using these letters in some new words. First up is a word that uses both of our new letters. Try reading it aloud. I hope you could successfully read this as Bog. It's a very important word for many Russian people. It means God. Let's write it. Bog. Next is a somewhat funny phrase with two grammatically correct sentences. We already know some of these words. Hopefully remember that on and jest mean he and its. Begemoth is similar to the English word behemoth, but in Russian it also means hippopotamus. Travu means grass. So these sentences can be translated as it's a hippopotamus, it's eating grass. Now that we understand it, let's try writing it by hand. Он бегемот, он ест траву. Let's start with an uppercase O. Also remember that lowercase b does not connect directly to the next letter. Be careful not to confuse the lowercase m and t. Give it your best shot. Now it's time for Svetlana's insights. Are you familiar with Greek letters? Maybe you remember them from high school or college. If so, you've probably recognized a great deal of these Russian letters. The Cyrillic alphabet was originally derived from Greek letters, so many of them bear close resemblance even today. That just about wraps it up for this lesson. Next time I'll introduce some more new friends. I hope you're excited. See you in the next Alphavit Made Easy lesson. Пока-пока! Здравствуйте! Я Светлана. Welcome to RussianPod101.com. Alphavit Made Easy. The fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn the Russian Cyrillic alphabet, the alphabet. In the last lesson, we met several new friends and started using B and G. If you're watching this lesson, that means you're feeling comfortable with those and ready for a new challenge. In this lesson, we'll continue with a new friends category. Remember, these are letters that don't look like English letters, but have sounds that can be found in English. Our first new friend is D. Maybe you recognize this letter from a James Bond movie, or maybe you've seen da spelled out before. If you have, you probably realize that D is pronounced just like the English D. In printed form, size is the only difference between the uppercase and lowercase letters. Here's the uppercase. And the lowercase. Now we'll look at the cursive versions. English speakers will be happy to see that the cursive uppercase D looks pretty similar to an uppercase D. What a nice new friend! While it's written in a slightly different way, it should be easy to recognize. It's written in one stroke and you have to pick up your pen to begin the next letter. Unfortunately, D isn't such a nice friend when it comes to the lowercase. It looks just like a lowercase English G. This means you should have no problem writing it, but it's easy to accidentally read it as a G. Now we'll write them. And the lowercase. Let's move on to another new friend. The second letter we'll learn in this lesson looks like the number 3. Z. While it may look strange, Z has a pretty familiar sound. Z always makes a Z sound, and despite how it looks, it sounds exactly like the English Z. Here's how to write the printed versions. And the lowercase. Now let's take a look at how to write Z by hand. Uppercase Z is pretty similar to the printed version. It's one stroke, but we have to pick up our pen before moving on to the next letter. The lowercase is where it gets interesting. Remember learning cursive in elementary school? If you remember how to write the lowercase z, then you'll be happy to see the cursive Z is strikingly similar. Now it's time to write it. And the lowercase. Okay, that's it for our new friends in this lesson. Now it's time to bring everything together in order to write some new words. First up is a very common word that you'll use when talking about your plans. Can you read it by yourself? It's завтра. You're forgiven if you said zamra. The cursive T looks a lot like an English M. Now try to write it yourself. Завтра. The next word is a fun one. Let's see if you can read it. Did you read it as Дед Мороз? It can be tricky to know when O is O and when it's A, but we'll talk more about that in a later lesson. Дед Мороз is the Russian Santa Claus. So let's try writing it. Both Дед and Мороз should start with uppercase letters. Дед Мороз. Remember that after the uppercase D, you have to pick up your pen to start the next letter. M, on the other hand, connects easily to the next letter. Nice job! Now it's time for Svetlana's insights. You may have noticed that some uppercase letters like D don't seem to be connecting very well. This happens with many uppercase letters in Russian. In these situations, you have the choice of either letting the letter stand alone and starting from the next lowercase letter, or adding a little connecting tail to the uppercase letter. However, when writing, most people don't connect D, V, and other difficult to connect uppercase letters. That's it for this lesson. Next time we'll continue to introduce more new friends. See you in the next Alphavit Made Easy lesson. Пока-пока! Здравствуйте, я Светлана. Welcome to RussianPod101.com. Alphavit Made Easy. The fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn the Russian Cyrillic alphabet, the alphabet. In the last lesson, we made two more new friends, D and Z. I hope you remember how to read and write them. In this lesson, we'll continue with the new friends category. Our first new friend is E. Because it's just a backwards English N, E really isn't that scary. As its name implies, E is pronounced just like the hard English E. In printed form, size is the only difference between the upper and lowercase versions. Here's the uppercase. And the lowercase. E isn't such a nice friend when it comes to the cursive letter. It looks similar to the cursive English U, and not very much like the printed version. With a little practice, you shouldn't have as much trouble recognizing and writing it. It is written in one stroke and connects easily to the next letter. Again, the lowercase version looks similar to an English U, so hopefully this means it should be easy to write. Just remember that in Russian, a Y-looking letter sounds like U, and a U-looking letter sounds like E. Now we'll write them. And the lowercase. Let's move on to another new friend. The second letter we'll learn in this lesson might look like a pair of opposing legs. L. While it may look strange, L has a pretty familiar sound. L. Despite how it looks, it sounds exactly like the English L. Here's how to write the printed versions. These can be written in two ways. And the lowercase. In cursive, uppercase L is pretty easy to write, even though it looks quite different from the printed version. It's one stroke, and we don't have to pick up our pen before connecting to the next letter. Now, the lowercase is where it gets interesting. When on its own, L looks the same as the uppercase, but smaller. But remember the Russian M. It has a hook on the left when it follows other letters. L is exactly the same, so it looks like this when it comes after another letter. Time to write it for yourself. And the lowercase. Okay, that's it for our new friends in this lesson. Now it's time to expand your Russian vocabulary. First up is a word that uses both of our new letters, and is very easy. Pronounced ili. This is a pretty common word that means or. So on или она means he or she. Writing it isn't too complicated either, so try writing this one with all lowercase letters. Или. Good! Next up is an incredibly important question that uses L. Try reading it aloud. Как дела? Как was our first word, and you must remember that it means how. Дела is kind of like things or activities, but when we use it here, it means how are things or how are you? Got it? Then try to write it. Remember to start with an uppercase letter. Как дела? Now it's time for Svetlana's insights. We've finished 8 lessons, and you already learned more than half of the Russian letters. Are you feeling more confident yet? If not, just look through a Russian text, a book, website, or whatever, and see how many letters you now recognize. It's fun when you start to recognize something that used to be incomprehensible. That's it for this lesson. Consider this. You're lost and don't know where to go. But you haven't learned how to say where in Russian yet. You'll learn how to say that, but more importantly, how to write it in the next Alphavit Made Easy lesson. Пока-пока! Здравствуйте! Я Svetlana. Welcome to RussianPod101.com. Alphavit made easy. The fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn the Russian Cyrillic alphabet, the alphabet. In the last lesson, we learned two more new friends, E and L. Do you remember them? In this lesson, we'll finish up the new friends. Let's start. Our first new friend is P. If you remember pi from your math lessons, it might help you to remember how this letter looks and how it sounds. P is pronounced just like the English P. In printed form, size is the only difference between the upper and lowercase versions. Here's the uppercase. And the lowercase. Here are the cursive versions. If you remember the uppercase T, this will look very familiar, but with 2 vertical strokes instead of 3. It may be confusing because the lowercase version looks similar to an English N. Just remember that in Russian, a lowercase n looking letter sounds like P, and a P looking letter sounds like R. Now we'll write them. And the lowercase. Let's move on to another new friend. The second letter we'll learn in this lesson looks like a popsicle. While it may look strange, F has a pretty familiar sound. F makes a F sound, and despite its look, it's exactly like the English F. In printed form, size is the only difference between the upper and lowercase versions. Here's how to write the printed versions. And the lowercase. Uppercase F is a bit difficult to write. People write this in different ways, but we will be learning how to write it in 3 strokes. First, write the stem, then add the left and right sides, and connect to the next letter from the bottom. The lowercase is also interesting. It looks similar to the uppercase except for how it dips beneath the line. Think of it as a lowercase English P, but with 2 faces. Again, this can be written in a few ways, but here we'll write it in 2 strokes. Handwriting time. And the lowercase. We have one more new friend to introduce. E. This one is particularly strange looking, but E has a pretty familiar sound. E makes the sound we hear in mat, bat, or hat. In printed form, size is the only difference between the upper and lowercase versions. Here's how to write the printed versions. And the lowercase. Uppercase E is pretty easy to write, and because it looks quite similar to the printed version, it's also easy to read. It's written in 2 strokes. The lowercase is also easy. Lowercase e looks like this, very similar to the uppercase. Again, this is written in 2 strokes. Note that you have to pick up your pen before starting the next letter. Time to write it yourself. And the lowercase. Wow, that's all for the new friends. We've learned so many letters. Now let's take a look at some example sentences that we can write. First up is a phrase that introduces 2 very important new words. Try reading it aloud. We read this Это собака. Remember how O can be pronounced as a soft A? In this case, we pronounce both O's as A. Это is an extremely important word. It means this is. You will hear this word constantly in Russian. Собака is also pretty important. It means dog. So the whole phrase means this is a dog. Now let's try writing it by hand. Это собака. Now let's move on to something bigger and better. No more dogs. We read this phrase as Где эта фабрика? В Петербурге. Let's go over the words. Где means where, and эта фабрика means the factory. So the question is, where is the factory? For the answer we responded в Петербурге, which means in St. Petersburg. Where is the factory? In St. Petersburg. Let's write this. Где эта фабрика? В Петербурге. In the next lesson, we'll review all the letters we've learned so far and introduce a few new words and phrases. I hope you're excited. See you in the next Alphavit Made Easy lesson. Пока-пока! Здравствуйте! Я Светлана. Welcome to RussianPod101.com's Alphavit Made Easy, the fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn the Russian Cyrillic alphabet, the alphabet. In the first 9 lessons, you learned 21 of the 33 Russian letters. We're 2/3 through the alphabet and halfway through this series. Today we're going to take a break from learning new letters and instead focus on reviewing the ones you've already learned. Then you learn how to write some more sentences. First, we'll review the true friends. It may have been a while, but do you remember them? They are the ones that look and sound like English letters. They should all look familiar, but let's review. First, we had A, then K, then M, and O, and finally T. Are you feeling confident with those letters? Now's the chance to go back to an old lesson and review. No? Then let's now review the false friends. As you remember, these are Russian letters that look like English letters but have much different pronunciations. There were 7 of these. First we learned Y, then N, and V. After that we had R, and then S, U, and finally H. Alright, moving forward and into slightly more difficult territory, we had the new friends, which don't look like English letters at all, but have familiar English sounds. There were 9 of those. First up was B, and G, then D, and Z. After that, E, and L, and then P, then F, and finally E. Wow, you've learned a lot of letters, and you can write a lot of words with them too. Let's write some more. Here we have a simple exchange. Try reading it aloud to yourself. Кто она? Она Екатерина. Откуда она? Она из России. You probably already recognize a lot of the words. You know that кто она means who is she. You might also guess that она Екатерина means she is Catherine. Ekaterina is the Russian form of Catherine. The question откуда она introduces a new word. Откуда, which means from where. So this line translates to where is she from? Lastly, из России means from Russia. Из means from, and Россия is a grammatical form of Россия, the Russian name for Russia. Let's go ahead and practice writing out this dialect line by line. Кто она? Она Екатерина. Откуда она? Она из России. Let's try another example. This one should be fun. First, try sounding out the words. Спасибо за внимание. Maybe you heard спасибо before. It means thank you. Next we have за, which means for, and внимание, which means attention. So this phrase is the Russian equivalent of thanks for your attention. You'll often hear this at the end of a presentation or speech. But another place you'll see внимание is on warning signs. Now let's practice writing this phrase by hand. Спасибо за внимание. Now it's time for Svetlana's insights. If you're in Russia, try and read signs around you. If that's not possible, by picking up a Russian book or newspaper, you'll have a great opportunity to start recognizing the letters in a real-world setting. If you're up for a real challenge, try and read people's handwriting. That's all for the review. No more friends for you. From the next lesson, we'll meet the strangers, the most foreign of the Russian letters for English learners. We'll learn that and much more in the next Alphavit Made Easy lesson. Пока-пока! Здравствуйте, я Светлана. Welcome to RussianPod101.com. Alphavit Made Easy, the fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn the Russian Cyrillic alphabet, the alphabet. You're officially on the second half. Last time we quickly reviewed all of our true friends, false friends, and new friends. Then we learned a few new words and phrases. Now is where it gets really fun. In this lesson, we'll introduce our last category of Russian letters, strangers. Strangers are letters which don't look familiar and don't have equivalent letter in English. After that, we'll learn some more phrases for your notebook. Ready to go? Our first stranger is ya. It looks like a backwards R, but unfortunately it doesn't sound similar at all. It's almost always pronounced ya, like Y-A in English. In addition to being a letter, on its own it's one of the most important words in Russian, the first personal pronoun I. In printed form, size is the only difference between the upper and lowercase versions. Here's the uppercase. And the lowercase. The cursive version of uppercase Ya looks like this. With the loop, it may seem a bit confusing at first, but once you get used to it, you will realize that it's quite an efficient stroke. Lowercase Ya is written the same way as the uppercase except for the smaller size. It also has a hook on the left. This is the third letter we have learned that uses a hook when following another letter. Now let's write them. And the lowercase. The second letter we learn in this lesson looks like the number 4, Che. While it may look strange, Che has a pretty familiar sound. Che usually makes a ch sound, but sometimes it can sound like sh when used before a hard sound or at the beginning of the word. We'll go over this in more detail later. Size is the only difference between the uppercase and lowercase versions. Here's how to write the printed versions. And the lowercase. Now let's see how to write Che by hand. Uppercase Che is very easy to write, and because it looks quite similar to the printed version, it's very easy to read too. It's written with a single stroke and connects smoothly to the next letter. The lowercase is a bit more interesting. When it stands alone, it's pretty easy to recognize, but when it's connected to a preceding letter, it looks similar to the lowercase cursive R in English. When transitioning into Che, you have to stretch the connection point from the previous letter so it connects more smoothly. Handwriting time. And the lowercase. Great! We've learned 2 new letters. Now let's see some new sentences that you can write. First up is a question and answer that introduces a very important and useful phrase. Try reading it aloud. Did you try to say что? It's nearly impossible, isn't it? That's why the first word in this sentence is pronounced что, with an SH sound. This is an incredibly useful word because it means what. We know это means this. So basically you're asking, what is this? Что это? In the answer we see это again, and фабрика, which we already know means factory. Моя means my. So the question and answer fully translated as, what is this? This is my factory. Что это? Это моя фабрика. Don't forget the hook on the lowercase ya. Now you're ready to move on to another useful phrase. Read this phrase as «Я еду через Москву». Let's go over the words in this phrase. As we just mentioned, «Я» means I. «Еду» means to go by transport. «Через» means through. And Москву is a conjugated form of Moscow. So fully translated, it reads, I'm going through Moscow, with the implication that you're going by transport and not by foot. Я еду через Москву. In the next lesson, we'll meet a few more strangers. I hope you're excited. See you in the next Alphavit Made Easy lesson. Пока-пока! Здравствуйте, я Svetlana. Welcome to RussianPod101.com's Alphavit Made Easy, the fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn the Russian Cyrillic alphabet, the alphabet. In the last lesson, we introduced the first two strangers, Che and Ya. Have you been reviewing how to read and write them? I hope you're ready to move on. In this lesson, we'll learn two more strangers and some more sentences for your notebook. The first stranger is I краткое, and it's a letter that doesn't make the sound of its name. It looks similar to a Russian I, and the name even means short I. However, I краткое is never pronounced alone. It only appears in combination with a vowel. For example, ой, ай, ей. As you may have noticed, it makes a sound similar to I, but a bit shorter. I hope that's not too difficult. We'll see more examples at the end of the lesson. In printed form, size is the only difference between the upper and lowercase versions. Here's the uppercase. And the lowercase. The cursive uppercase I краткое looks like this. It's exactly the same as I, except for the crown on top. The lowercase I краткое follows the same pattern. You probably won't have any problems writing this letter. Now let's write them. And the lowercase. The second letter may look strange, but it has a pretty familiar sound. This is C, and it makes a TS sound like the Z's in pizza. While it's rare in the English language, it's more common in Russian, and it can even be found at the beginning of words. In the printed form, size is the only difference between the upper and lowercase versions. Here's how to write the printed versions. And the lowercase. In cursive, uppercase C is easy to write and read. It's written with a single stroke and connects easily to the next letter. The lowercase looks exactly the same, but smaller. Although C looks quite similar to I in lowercase, the distinctive loop below the line makes it easier to recognize. And the lowercase. Great job! Now let's take what we've learned so far and look at some more examples that we can write. First up is a question and answer that you may recognize, but with some new vocabulary. Try reading it aloud. We read this as «Кто это?» Это мой отец. You should have been able to pronounce the first question with no problems. As you may have guessed, «Кто это?» means «Who is this?». The answer should look familiar as well. Это means «this is», but «мой отец» is new. Notice how «мой» is pronounced with a blend of «о» and «и» краткое. This is what «и» краткое does to other vowels. The last word, «отец», is a good word to know, because it means father. So the answer to the question, who is this is my father. Кто это? Это мой отец. We read this phrase as yogurt с малиной. Let's go over the words in this phrase. Yogurt means yogurt, s means with, and малиной means raspberries. Yogurt and raspberries. Yum. Йогурт с малиной. That's it for this lesson. In the next lesson, we'll introduce a few more strangers. See you in the next Alphavit Made Easy lesson. Пока-пока! Здравствуйте, я Светлана. Welcome to RussianPod101.com's Alphavit Made Easy, the fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn the Russian Cyrillic alphabet, the alphabet. In the last lesson, we introduced some more strangers, the most challenging letters of the Russian alphabet. We learned I, краткое, and C. Have you been reviewing how to read and write them? I hope you're ready to move on. In this lesson, we'll learn two more strangers and some more sentences for your notebook. The first stranger this time is U. This is a letter that may be hard to pronounce. It looks like a lowercase b and l next to each other. But be careful to recognize that it is a single letter. The sound it makes is U. There is no similar sound in English. Interestingly, there is no uppercase U because it's never at the beginning of a word. Here's the lowercase. Now that we've seen the print version of U, let's take a look at how to write it by hand. The cursive version of U looks like this. As you can see, it's a single smooth stroke. While it looks a little bit complicated, it's actually quite natural to write, and it shouldn't be much of a challenge. Now let's write it. The second letter we'll learn in this lesson looks kind of like the ship from Star Trek. U. While it may look strange, U has a pretty familiar sound. U makes a combination vowel sound just like the word you. In printed form, size is the only difference between the upper and lowercase versions. Here's how to write the printed versions. And the lowercase. Now let's see how to write U by hand. It's written with two strokes. The lowercase looks similar except for size. Many people write it using a single stroke. As you can see, this is more efficient. And the lowercase. Great job! Now let's take what we learned so far and look at some more examples that we can write. First up is a fact about a famous Russian. Try reading it aloud. Here's how it should sound. Yuri Gagarin был первым космонавтом. Did you recognize the name Yuri Gagarin? Well, if so, then maybe you can guess what it means. Yuri Gagarin was the first cosmonaut. Let's look at each word in the sentence. Yuri Gagarin means Yuri Gagarin. Был means was. And первым космонавтом means the first cosmonaut. That wasn't too bad, was it? Now let's write it by hand, using the font to write uppercase U. Юрий Гагарин был первым космонавтом. Now let's look at another sentence that you will probably use a lot as a beginner. Try saying the sentence out loud. Я не понимаю. Did you get it right? The first two words might be familiar. Я means I, and не in this case means don't. The last word is new, but very important. Понимаю means understand. I don't understand. Я не понимаю. That's it for this lesson. In the next lesson, we'll introduce a few more strangers. See you in the next Alphavit Made Easy lesson. Пока-пока! Здравствуйте, я Светлана. Welcome to RussianPod101.com. Alphavit Made Easy, the fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn the Russian Cyrillic alphabet, the alphabet. You're almost there. Today we'll learn 2 of the remaining 6 letters. Last time we learned 2 more strangers, I and U. Do you remember how to read and write them? I hope you're ready to move on. In this lesson, we'll learn 2 more strangers and some more sentences for your notebook. Our first stranger is yo, and it probably looks familiar, just like our false friend ye. Yo and ye are closely related, and they're usually even written in the same way. Here's the uppercase. And the lowercase. The cursive version of uppercase yo looks like this. It should look familiar. The only difference is the 2 dots on top. You might notice that in everyday writing, some Russians don't dot their yos, but we are going to learn it the correct way. Lowercase yo looks the same as ye, but with dots. These letters shouldn't be much of a challenge. Now let's write them. And the lowercase. The second letter we'll learn in this lesson may be the most difficult to write in the entire Russian alphabet, zh. Luckily, the sound is quite easy. Zh makes a zh sound much like in treasure. While it isn't very common in English, the sound is very frequently used in Russian. It looks quite distinctive, like a star, so it shouldn't be hard to remember. The lowercase version is just smaller. Here's how to write the printed versions. And the lowercase. Zh is probably easier to say than to write, and it looks slightly different than the printed version. It's written in 3 strokes, with a sharp up and down motion on the second stroke. The last stroke connects easily to the next letter. The lowercase looks exactly the same except for size. It can be difficult to master this letter, but don't give up. And the lowercase. That's it for new letters. Now we'll focus on some new sentences. First up is the title of a famous Soviet animated film. We read this as Ёжик в тумане. Ёжик means hedgehog, and в тумане means in the fog. This is the title of a classic Russian animated short that was based on an old folk tale. Ёжик в тумане. Let's learn one more sentence. This one introduces a verb that you will be using very often. Try saying the sentence out loud. We read this sentence as Она живет в Москве. As you already know, она means she. Живет is a new word that means lives. And в Москве means in Moscow. You may have noticed that v by itself is a very important preposition in Russian. It means both to and in many situations. Она живет в Москве. That's it for this lesson. In the next lesson, we'll introduce a few more strangers. See you in the next Alphavit Made Easy lesson. Пока-пока! Здравствуйте! Я Светлана. Welcome to RussianPod101.com. Alphavit Made Easy. The fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn the Russian Cyrillic alphabet, the alphabet. Just a little further. Today we'll learn 2 of the remaining 4 letters. Last time we learned 2 more strangers, yo and zhe. Do you remember how to read and write them? I hope you're ready to move on. In this lesson, we'll learn 2 more strangers and some more sentences for your notebook. Our first stranger is sha, and it looks vaguely like an English W. It makes a sh sound like in show. The lowercase version is just smaller. Here's the uppercase. And the lowercase. The cursive version of uppercase sha looks like this. It's very similar to the capital E, but has an extra peak. The lowercase is the same as the uppercase but smaller. I don't think you'll have any problems writing this letter. Now let's write them. And the lowercase. The second letter we'll learn in this lesson is very easy to read and write, but very difficult to say. Sha looks and sounds very similar to sha, but with some minor but important distinctions. Sha has a sharper sound than sha. It's similar to the sharp sh in shu. Some people say it's like a combination of sh and ch. Here's how to write the printed versions. And the lowercase. Now let's see how to write sha by hand. Uppercase sha is very similar to sha, except it has a little extra tail that makes it different. It's written in one stroke, just like sha, but with a small loop at the end. It connects easily to the next letter after the loop. The size is the only difference between the upper and lowercase versions. And the lowercase. Okay, time to learn some new sentences. First up is a useful phrase for those of you looking for a place to stay in Russia. Can you sound it out? We read this as «Я ищу хорошую квартиру». We already know some of these words. «Я» means I. «Ищу» means I'm looking for. Next is «хорошую». Can you guess what this means? It's a form of the adjective «хорошее» that means good. And finally, «квартиру» means apartment. So altogether, this phrase means I'm looking for a good apartment. Я ищу хорошую квартиру. Nice job! Let's take a look at one more phrase that uses both of our new letters. Can you read it? It's pronounced «щи да каша, пища наша». The first part is «щи да каша». Щи is a popular type of Russian soup, and kasha is a type of simple porridge. In the second part, пища наша, means our food or our diet. So essentially, the phrase translates to shi soup and kasha porridge is our food. It is an expression that means you're simple and plain. And can you hear the difference between sha and sha? Shi da kasha, pища наша. That's it for this lesson. The next lesson will cover the final letters of the Russian alphabet, so you'll be able to read and write anything at all. See you in the next Alphavit Made Easy lesson. Пока-пока! Здравствуйте, я Светлана. Welcome to RussianPod101.com's Alphavit Made Easy, the fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn the Russian Cyrillic alphabet, the alphabet. In this lesson, you're going to finish learning the Russian alphabet. We've come so far. In the beginning, you might have had trouble telling a ya from a yo, but look at you now. Last time, we learned the letters zhe and yo. Do you remember how to read and write them? I hope you're ready to move on. In this lesson, we'll learn the last two strangers and some more sentences for a notebook. Our first stranger is мягкий знак, which probably looks a little familiar, like a lowercase English b. But as you may have noticed, мягкий знак doesn't sound like a letter name. That's because it doesn't have a sound by itself. Translated, мягкий знак means soft mark, and its only job is to make the sound of the consonant coming before it softer. Can you hear the difference between these two words? Угол and уголь. Listen again. Угол and уголь. You will see this mark at the end of a lot of words. In fact, every verb in the basic form ends with мягкий знак. But because no words actually start with мягкий знак, there is no uppercase version. Here's the lowercase. The cursive version of мягкий знак looks like this. It may look familiar because it's very similar to «ы», but without the second part. Now you try it out. The last letter we learned looks extremely similar to мягкий знак, and it's quite closely related. Твердый знак. Твердый знак also does not have a sound of its own, but changes the pronunciation of the preceding letter. So if мягкий знак means soft sign, can you guess what твердый знак is? If you guessed hard sign, you're correct. Твердый знак is much less common than мягкий знак, but it does show up sometimes. Listen to the difference between сесть and съесть. Сесть, съесть. Can you hear it? Here's how to write the printed version. Writing твердый знак by hand isn't very hard. It's quite similar to мягкий знак, except for the extra bar on the left to tell it apart. Just like its brother, it's written with a single stroke. Time to write your last new letter. And with that, you have the power of the entire русский alphabet at your fingertips. Isn't that exciting? Since we can't read or write anything now, let's take a look at some idioms. Idioms can be a fun way to learn new words, practice your handwriting, and impress your Russian friends. First up is an idiom that shouldn't be difficult to understand when translated. Let's try reading this aloud. Хочется рыбку съесть, да не хочется в воду лезть. Can you hear the твердый знак in съесть and мягкий знак in лезть? If not, don't worry. You'll get it with practice. Хочется рыбку съесть means he wants to eat a fish. And «да не хочется в воду лезть» means «but he doesn't want to get into the water». This idiom means that to get what you want, you must do what is necessary under the circumstances. Let's write it. Хочется рыбку съесть, да не хочется в воду лезть. Great job! But remember to practice on your own. Let's see another idiom. Больше слушай, меньше говори. The first phrase «больше слушай» means listen more. And the second phrase «меньше говори» means speak less. Listen more, speak less. That's pretty straightforward. Больше слушай, меньше говори. In this lesson, you learned the last of the Russian letters. Game over, right? Нет. There is still plenty to learn. In the next lesson, we'll introduce the Russian system of hooks and bar notation. These are helpful when reading and writing in Russian. See you in the next Alphavit Made Easy lesson. Пока-пока! Здравствуйте! Я Светлана. Welcome to RussianPod101.com. Alphavit Made Easy. The fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn the Russian Cyrillic alphabet, the alphabet. Now that you've learned all the letters, the last 4 lessons of this series will be looking at some strategies on how to read and write effectively, all while learning some fun Russian sayings, idioms, and proverbs. In this lesson, I'll cover the system of hooks and bars for writing Russian letters. Hooks and bars can be used when writing to help you tell similar-looking letters apart. As you've probably noticed, a lot of letters can be easy to confuse when written. To be more clear, many people use a small bar over their lowercase t and under their lowercase sha to help distinguish between them. Let's see how that looks in the word shtamp, which means stamp. See? Putting bars under the sha and above the te make it much easier to read. Here are 2 notoriously difficult words to read in cursive without bars. Pretty ridiculous, right? It boggles the mind. But now let's add some bars. Oh, that's much better. Can you read them now? Shishki means pine cones, and dishish means you breathe. That's all there is to it. Let's move on to hooks. This will be just a quick review because we've been learning this as we introduced the letters. You probably remember that some Russian letters take hooks when following other letters. Can you remember which ones? Well, there are 3 in total: L, M, and Ya. The reason that to write these hooks is not just to make these words easier to read. Remember, in Russian cursive, the connecting point of each letter is actually above the line. So we have to make a hook to start these letters from the correct position. It's important to note that when the letter begins a word or stands alone, it doesn't really look like a hook. For example, mama means mother, and as you can see, it looks like the second M has a hook. But if you look hard, you notice that the first M also starts and ends above the line. It's not too difficult, but we just need to develop good habits and remember to write consistently in this way. Here's a sentence that has several hooking letters. You will recognize some of the words here. Это мой means this is my, and семейный альбом means family album. Это мой семейный альбом. This is my family album. That's not too hard, right? Try to write this sentence a few times to practice your hooks. Notice how this one has a bar as well. To sum up, when writing in the cursive style, there are two letters that get bars, sh and te. And there are three letters that get hooks, L, M, and ya. Nice job! Now let's try and apply our newfound knowledge to another idiom. Here's a saying that's very popular in English too. Can you read it? Хорошо там, где нас нет. It has some words that you might recognize. Хорошо там means it's good there. Где means where. Нас is a form of we. And нет means no or not. So this means it's good where we aren't. And is an equivalent version of an English saying, the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence. Хорошо там, где нас нет. Did you remember your hooks and bars? Now it's time for Svetlana's insights. Now that you know how to write with bars and hooks, keep it up. As you get more experience, you can do as the Russians do and dispense with the bars if you feel like it. But the hooks are an essential part of learning how to write well. That's it for this lesson. In the next lesson, we'll introduce the Russian system of accents and teach you how it affects the pronunciation of some words. See you in the next Alphavit Made Easy lesson. Пока-пока! Здравствуйте, я Светлана. Welcome to RussianPod101.com. Alphavit Made Easy. The fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn the Russian Cyrillic alphabet, the alphabet. In this lesson, we'll be learning the system of accents in the Russian language and learn how it affects word stress and the pronunciation of some letters. As we have gone through the series, I have told you from time to time that certain letters aren't always pronounced the same way. Well, in this lesson, we'll clarify why and when that is. In fact, writing with accents in Russian makes reading it much easier. So why did we wait until the end of the series to introduce it? Because unfortunately, it isn't used outside of textbooks, and it's really just a teaching and learning aid. Every word in Russian has a stressed syllable. In English, even knowing which syllable has stress doesn't always help you pronounce the word correctly, because so many spellings are irregular. Russian, on the other hand, is much more phonetic. So knowing the letter combination and which syllable is stressed will help you read the word correctly 99% of the time. let's think back to those letters which have multiple pronunciations. There are only two, O and Ye. So for example, O can be read as O or A, but how do you know when? Well, it depends on whether or not they are the stressed vowel in the word. When O and Ye are stressed, they sound normal. So let's see a simple case. We denote stressed syllables by writing a знак ударения, an accent mark, above the stressed vowel. But if a word is only one syllable, there is only one place for the stress to go. For example, он есть. So you know it's one syllable and you know that when O and Ye are stressed, they sound normal. So you can predict exactly how to pronounce these words. Let's look at a few more examples where there is more than one syllable, but the O or Ye is still stressed. Ольга, форель. As you can hear and see from the accent marks, the O in Olga and the Ye in forel are the stressed vowels. But what about when they are unstressed? Well, let's find out. O is pretty easy. When it's unstressed, it sounds like the letter A. So here is a word that has both stressed and unstressed O's. Хорошо. Here we see that there are three O's, but only one is stressed. So it's easy to hear how the other two O's sound like A. You probably remember this word means good or well. Хорошо. Ye is a little more complicated, but it usually sounds like a very short E. Here is a word with an unstressed Ye. Будет. Будет means will be. Because it isn't stressed, the Ye is pronounced as E. Can you hear it? Будет. Okay, you've practiced on words, but now let's see a whole sentence. I'm not going to read it right away. Try and figure out how it's pronounced by yourself. It's read as «Два медведя в одной берлоге не живут» and means two bears won't live in the same den, meaning something like this town is too small for the both of us. Два медведя в одной берлоге не живут. Now it's time for Svetlana's insights. Accent marks are a great way to learn how to pronounce a word, but try not to depend on them too much, and remember that they are just an educational tool, not something you will experience in real life. Good luck! In the next lesson, we'll compare how Russian punctuation differs from English punctuation and learn some fun idioms along the way. See you in the next Alphavit Made Easy lesson. Пока-пока! Здравствуйте, я Светлана. Welcome to RussianPod101.com's Alphavit Made Easy, the fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn the Russian Cyrillic alphabet, the alphabet. In this lesson, we'll be learning about how the Russian punctuation system differs from English. First, I'll give you the good news. In general, Russian follows punctuation rules that are similar to English. So things like periods, semicolons, and exclamation points are more or less the same in Russian, and we won't be discussing them in this lesson. Instead, we'll be focusing on the differences in the use of the em dash and the Russian equivalents for the quotation marks. First, let's see how the em dash is used in Russian. For those of you that don't already know, the em dash is the longer dash that looks like this in a sentence. In English, this is not a very common grammatical symbol, but in Russian it is used quite frequently. Russian does not use a present tense to be verb like am, is, and are. Instead, it is very common to see the em dash used for short and direct sentences, like the one we just saw. This indicates a level of strong connection. Are you getting used to seeing accent marks? If so, you should have had no trouble reading the phrases «Мой отец – врач». We already know that «Мой отец» means «my father», and the second half of the sentence, врач, means doctor. With the em dash, we are stating that my father is a doctor. Another use of the em dash can be in reported speech, and we'll go over that a little later. Here's another example. Одна голова хорошо, а две лучше. This is a simple proverb. Одна голова means one head. And of course we know that хорошо means good. А две means but two. And лучше means better. Doesn't this remind you of two heads are better than one? See how the M dashes are used to highlight the relationship between one head and good and but two and better. Great job! Next we'll look a bit at how Russians write reported speech. Instead of using quotation marks, we have to use an M dash here. For example, «Я тебя люблю», сказал Виктор. In this example, the M dashes offset «Я тебя люблю», which means I love you. After the quoted speech, we write «сказал Виктор», which means said Victor. So this is one way that Russians use M dashes to report speech in the written form. Now we'll look at one last difference in Russian punctuation. What about other instances where we use quotes in English? In English, we use quotation marks to set aside the name of something like a movie or book, and also to quote from other works. In Russian, instead of using quotation marks, we use angle brackets that look like this around the quoted words or title. Let's look at an example. Я читал «Война и мир». Here we see our trusty old friend «я», which means I. Next is читал, which means read. And then the title of Tolstoy's most famous novel, «Война и мир», War and Peace. You can see how this is written using angle brackets, where in English we would use quotation marks. Here's one final example. Достоевский написал «Преступление и наказание». Раскольников – главный герой романа. Here we see both the M dash and the unusual angled brackets. In the first line, hopefully you were able to pronounce and recognize that Dostoevsky is the famous Russian novelist, Dostoevsky. The next word is написал, which means wrote. And finally, «Преступление и наказание», his famous novel, Crime and Punishment. Because it's the name of the novel, we surround it with angled brackets. The next line starts with Raskolnikov, which is the name. Then главный герой, which means main character. And finally, романа, which means of the novel. So the second line reads, Raskolnikov is the main character of the novel. In that sentence, you can see how the M dash is used in the absence of a to be verb. This series has gone by so fast. In the next and final lesson, we'll review everything that we've learned in this series, and by the end, you will be able to write a sentence that uses every single letter of the Russian alphabet. In addition, we'll learn some more fun idioms that you can use to impress your Russian friends. See you in the next Alphabet Made Easy lesson. Пока-пока! Здравствуйте, я Светлана. Welcome to RussianPod101.com. Alphabet Made Easy. The fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn the Russian Cyrillic alphabet, the alphabet. You made it! This is our very last lesson together. In this lesson, we won't be learning any new letters, punctuation, or pronunciation, but instead we'll review everything that we've covered so far. If you find this lesson easy, then that just means that you're ready to move on to the next stage of Russian learning. Do you remember the true friends? Those were letters that look and sound like English letters. How about the false friends? Those ones look familiar but have a very different sound. And how about the new friends? Those letters look strange, but they had the familiar sound of a single letter in English. And of course there were the strangers, completely new-looking letters that have no equivalent in English. Altogether we learned the 33 letters of the Russian Cyrillic alphabet. Congratulations! You're all done with new letters, so that means there are no limits to the new Russian phrases you can write. Let's see a few. Here's an idiom that is used quite frequently, especially by children. Can you read it? Не имей 100 рублей, а имей 100 друзей. It roughly translates to, it's better to have 100 friends than 100 rubles, which is the Russian currency. Now let's write this down so you can add it to your notebook. Не имей 100 рублей, а имей 100 друзей. Next up, we have a rather famous expression that was used by Premier Gorbachev when a subordinate was trying to weasel out of his responsibility. Can you read it? Вешать лапшу на уши. Literally, it means to hang noodles on ears, but it's used to mean to talk nonsense or tell lies. Gorbachev famously told his subordinate, "Don't hang noodles on my ears." So these days, even non-Russian speakers have heard of this idiomatic expression. Now try writing these famous words by hand. Вешать лапшу на уши. Nice job! I think you're ready to move on to the final challenge. Are you familiar with the pangram? How about the phrase, "The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog"? A pangram is a sentence or phrase that uses all the letters of an alphabet. Now we're going to look at one in Russian. If you can read and write a phrase that uses every letter of the Russian alphabet, then you know you've mastered it. Here you go. I know it's long, but don't let it intimidate you. You've been preparing for this moment for 19 lessons. I'll give you 10 full seconds to try and read it by yourself. Remember to use accent marks to guide you in your pronunciation. We read it as «Съешь же еще этих мягких французских булок, да выпей чаю». Let's go over the meaning. «Съешь же» is a casual way of ordering someone to eat, and «еще» means more. After that we have «этих мягких французских булок», which means these soft French buns. And finally we see «да выпей чаю», which means and drink some tea. So the entire sentence roughly translates to eat some more of these soft French buns and drink some tea. Weird, right? Well, so is a quick brown fox jumping over lazy dogs. Now it's time to write it. Съешь же еще этих мягких французских булок, да выпей чаю. Now it's time for Svetlana's insights. You're done! I recommend that you go out and pick up a few Russian children's books. There are lots of wonderful Russian folk tales and stories that are accessible even to beginners, and some of them may even have accent marks. After you try reading them, try writing your favorite passages by hand. This will give you a chance to polish your handwriting skills. You have learned a lot about the Russian alphabet, and I certainly hope that you keep expanding that knowledge. Be sure to come to RussianPod101.com for the latest lessons and all kinds of other Russian learning materials. And if you're ready to learn some more useful Russian phrases, I'll be waiting for you in the Russian in 3 Minutes series. До свидания!
Expand your vocabulary with our Core 2000 Words ebook. It's free and packed with essential expressions that you'll use on a daily basis. Start building your vocabulary today. Click the link in the description below to download your free Russian ebook before it's gone.